Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April 2022 edition of the Kubernetes Community Meeting. Today is Thursday, April 21st, 2022, and I want to thank you for joining or watching this recording. A few housekeeping things before we get started. This community meeting is live streamed and will be posted publicly on YouTube. So please be mindful of what you say is being recorded. This is an official meeting of the Kubernetes project, and we abide by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which boils down to be excellent, kind, respectful to each other. I'm your host today. My name is Ray Alejano. I work at SUSE by way of Branch Labs, and I'm also the SIG Docs co-chair and wear a few other hats in the community. We also have Joseph Sandoval taking notes for us, so thank you, Joseph. And as a reminder, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. I'm going to paste a link in the Zoom chat here. That link is to the read-only version of the notes. So if you're not taking any notes or adding things to the agenda, please use this read-only version because Google Docs slows down when we have too many people in the doc. So we have a number of topics on the agenda today, and they were gathered from the community as topics that are deemed of general community interest. We encourage people to add agenda topics when there is a topic that the community should pay attention to or have visibility on. So please add to the agenda doc or contact a SIG contributor experience on Slack. So first off, let's start with announcements. So next month is KubeCon EU or in Europe, in Valencia, Spain. So we typically do not have a community meeting when we meet at KubeCon. There will be a contributor summit at KubeCon EU on Monday, May 16th, and please register at the kubernetes.dev/summit website. Also of note as well, since we have KubeCon Europe, and we will start off the Kubernetes 125 release cycle around that time, that the enhancements freeze will start shortly after KubeCon Europe. So this is a request to SIG, so please start planning out enhancements for 125. The third announcement is that there is a survey out about renaming Kubernetes/Kubernetes master branch to main. The survey ends on May 31st. I'm going to put the link to the survey on the Zoom chat here. So please take the survey and give us your inputs. I did also paste a link to the related KEP to this branch rename as well. I'll paste that link as well. It's also on the meeting notes agenda. Next announcement is from SIG K8s Infra. This is a load test request. So the request is to please use registry.k8s.io instead of k8s.gcr.io to test the load. And we want to do this to spread load and costs around cloud providers. We, of course, initially had it at GCR. So this registry.k8s.io is on AWS. There was an email out to the dev mailing list, and so feel free to ask any questions on that email thread, which is also on the agenda topic. Lastly, a third-party security audit for the Kubernetes project will actually start in May. This will be done by the NCC group. The last third-party security audit was in 2019, so this is great that we're going to have a third-party security audit done this year. There's links to the RFP and the RFP decision process out on the agenda as well. So with that concludes the announcements. I'm going to hand it off to James Laverack for the release updates.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Laverack. I am the release lead for Kubernetes 124. I have a short update for you all. The big news, of course, is that the scheduled release date was pushed back by 2 weeks. So it is now on Tuesday, 3rd May, in just under 2 weeks from now. The bug that caused that delay has been fixed and was shipped in Go 118.1, and that has been incorporated and fixed. We have a RC0 that was cut last Tuesday and is available for community testing, and I would encourage people to experiment and test with it. We're expecting to cut an RC1, our final scheduled release candidate, next Tuesday, 26th of April. In more general news, the shadow survey for the next release of Kubernetes, Kubernetes 125, is open and will close Friday, 29th of April. So if you're at all interested in the release team, do apply. We'd love to have new contributors, even in fact, especially contributors who have not contributed before, to join us on the release team. If you have any questions about any of that, either to do with 124 or 125, please come talk to us in SIG Release on Slack. And that is all from me.
Okay, thank you, James. Any comments or questions for James? All right, so I'm going to go right into the agenda with the first topic from Bob about tech lead separation. I'll hand it over.
Hey, folks. Actually, these two next topics, this one and the proposal for terms of chairs, are like semi-related. In general, we've been having a lot of issues with sort of bringing up new chairs, new leads within the project. And both of these are sort of helped to try and tackle that as a general problem. First, many, like the only required role for a SIG is a chair. And in the TL role is an optional one that rolls up. The responsibilities of the TL roll up to the chair in the absence of a named TL or tech lead. Yeah, thank you, Paris. And we have found that, like, after talking to lots of SIG leads, and not just SIG leads, but people in the community, the roles are often conflated together. So when people picture a chair, they often associate the roles of the responsibilities of the TL to them, or it just gets mixed up when they really truly are two separate things. And this has caused confusion and issues for the release team. It's also, when it comes to trying to thinking of a successor, a lot of people tend to think that they have to satisfy both roles, not just one of them. So we've been tossing around the idea of basically breaking the separation and making it so that way the TL role does not automatically roll up into the chair. They instead have to be explicitly defined. The actual, in the mechanics up for the people that are sort of sharing both roles, for now, they'd at least be named twice, both as a chair and a TL. And in some cases, this is already being done by several SIGs where there are TLs that are serving in the chair role, and some are not. But sort of the long-term goal of that is to, again, try and encourage more people into growing into these sort of like leadership positions, and mostly just by trying to get people to think of them as separate roles and like drive them to the two different areas that they can work on. Does anyone have any sort of questions or comments regarding the splitting of the chair and TL role? Does it make sense? Does it seem like a good idea? Okay, getting thumbs up. Does anyone else have anything to say in like the comments?
Danielle from chat says things seems like a great idea.
Yep.
I also agree as well.
Okay. Well, I will sort of like roll in. I'll just roll into the next thing.
Actually, we'll ask one question. What about SIGs that currently only have, like, say, 2 leads of any kind right now?
So for them, if they are satisfying both roles, they'd be named twice, both as chairs and TLs. Okay. With the long-term goal of getting more people into one or both of those named positions. Does that make sense? Okay. Alana?
Yeah, I know previously.
You are super, super quiet.
One moment. How about now? Constantly being sabotaged by Pulse Audio. I know there was previously some concern about if we split the roles, if we're having a difficult time finding people to fill the existing roles, like, doesn't this just make additional work? And I will say, I think like the idea, first of all, the idea of just double listing the chairs in some cases, like I think that makes sense. It doesn't really create any extra work. It just creates that explicit division so the same people can do the same jobs. I will also say that in SIG instrumentation, which I currently am a co-chair of, we did do the split and then appointed people separately into tech lead and chair roles. And even though we're like a very small SIG in terms of volume, most of our stuff is out of tree. I think it's been really positive for the SIG to have more active leadership and to give folks more opportunities to step up. So like, if you're worried like, oh no, I won't find people to do this work, or like we're going to be understaffed, I think you may be surprised in terms of how, if the opportunity is open, how many people are willing to step up.
Yeah, and that's something like right now, all those responsibilities shared by like a single person, and making them individually like makes it easier to like, oh, you only have to deal with these responsibilities or these responsibilities and not potentially both. Yeah, big general plus one. Let's see if there's any other comments. James, I'll submit that Signal like SIG release, I end up just paying the leads as a whole when I need something from SIG leadership perspective. Yeah, that's there is a lot of times there is like, again, the roles are conflated, even though they have separate responsibilities. Are there any other questions or comments before we roll into the next semi-related thing? Yes, Danielle, it simplifies succession planning. That is also the idea. Like a smaller scope role makes it easier to plan for. And speaking of succession planning, I'll just roll into the next thing. We are also talking about terms for the chair role, not term limit set this time, but just terms. And the reason for this is largely to try and think about succession planning. Most chairs, there's a lot of like administrative overhead. It is a lot of responsibility to keep it going. And there's a number of people that actually feel sort of, trapped in the role. They don't necessarily have a successor in mind. They're too overburdened to even think about, bringing on a successor. And so what this sort of does is, by establishing a term, it sort of builds in a checkpoint. So it's just like, okay, if I agree to be a chair for 2 years, that means, in a year and a half, I need to decide if I want to, continue to be a chair, or if I really need to focus on bringing on someone else to replace me. The other thing, and this has come up a lot more frequently as just sort of the state of being a maintainer in Kubernetes today. When your employer, if you are taking on a chair, it's a lot easier to get by like, okay, I'm agreeing to this role and these responsibilities for 2 years. And depending on how that plays out, again, can continue, like if it's aligned with my job, can continue with it. If not, can start thinking, the mechanism is sort of built in to start thinking about a successor and opening the opportunity to others. There's a whole lot of like other, like if you look in the notes and click on the 2 issues, there's a whole slew of various points that were brought up on both of them if you want more information. But with that, does anyone have any questions or thoughts on the idea of terms? Ray?
I do. So a few things. So back to the previous topic is one that leads into this as well. Having that default, if there is no tech lead, naming the chairs both co-chair and tech lead, kind of helps identify where we need to, I guess, ramp up maintainers and which SIGs need more contributors to become maintainers. Same idea with having terms for chairs as well. It helps identify that gap. And I know for me, it's always great to increase the number of contributors, but I know in through Slack discussions, we also want to increase the maintainers. So I think this is a great way to do that.
Yeah. Actually, one other point. A lot of times, like when it comes to like the splitting, like why we're only thinking of this for the chair role, for a lot of times it can take many years to become a TL and to retain that expertise in that space. So that's part of the reason why we are only thinking of this, of the terms, at least at this time, for the chair role. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments?
Would this be synchronized across all SIGs? So like same time for everyone, or is this going to be?
Well, honestly, it will likely be a progressive thing because you don't necessarily want all chairs to retire at the same time. I think it'd be, you know, say if we want to put in terms over the course of, by the end of 2022, try and find some more people, because you, at this point, you definitely want to have like 3 chairs, so that way you will constantly have, you know, at least one person around and not 2 people sort of, you know, cycling off if they do decide to cycle at the same time. So like there's still some of the mechanics of implementing this change that need to be sorted out. But the general idea is that we want to encourage more chairs, and then, you know, start, you know, having terms and being able to rotate people in and out.
Do we have any statistics for how long chairs tend to be in position at the moment?
Not offhand. It'd be crawling SIG.YAML changes. It's a little hard to see. Paris, you made a comment. I like the deputy chair idea as a shadow that LavaLamp suggested. So we've talked about this topic before in the chairs and TL meeting separately, and one of the ideas too was like having like a deputy chair, which is sort of the essentially the person that's going to take over your position. It's sort of like the step up before, you know, you step away to do it. Is 2 years agreed upon, or was that at this point, like it's an example figure? It seems pretty good though, because a year really seems too short. And 2 years is like enough time to have like time in the seat, and then time to start, you know, mentoring someone else to take over the position. This also kind of aligns with a lot of other things like CNCF tags. They're appointed to 2 years. If you look at like over in Apache and a whole bunch of other projects, they're all 2-year terms. Steering is 2-year terms. So it seems like a pretty solid number.
There is a comment from Paris that possibly it should be 3 years. Also, the question: would each SIG have flexibility on their terms? I'm assuming this is to be done, and upper limit needs to be there.
I don't think like we will have flexibility on the terms, because you don't necessarily want SIGs like, okay, we're just going to make our term 10 years. So I think it's going to be a more universal thing. And again, right now we are also not thinking term limits. It's, again, you are agreeing to, you know, hold this role for this period of time, and then can potentially revisit it again in, you know, 1.5 years when you start thinking about a mentor, or, you know, 2 years before starting the next term. This is still like, again, the mechanics and details are TBD, but we just want to get this idea floating more in the community and get people's thoughts on it before we get to, you know, decide on something more concrete.
All right. A few other notes from chat. Dim says +1 to 2 years, +1 to cap on number of terms.
Also, if you can, please also comment on the 2 issues that are linked, because those will be the things that really get sent out to, you know, for more comments from the broader community.
All right. Alana noted for as a data point that Debian Technical Committee is 5 to 6 years, project leaders 1 year, and Paris, yes, it is to be determined still. And please add your comments on the issues as well. Eddie also did put us +1 on terms. Not sure term limits benefit us. And Danielle's chatted, can hopefully give a lot of existing chair and tech lead combos, a path to step into tech lead / chair only roles to help with burnout issues. Also from Danielle, term limits benefit the community as a whole, as long as succession isn't exclusively to the same employer. Yeah, +1 to that.
Again, we still want to figure out we need to figure out the mechanics and explicit wording, but we want to get the ideas out in the community for broader consensus driving.
Yep. Tim and Nigel gave their +1s to Danielle's last comment about term limits benefiting the community as a whole, as long as succession is exclusively to the same employer. All right, any additional comments or questions about this topic? Scrolling any hands up, I don't see any hands. All right, let's jump to the next topic of annual reports. I'm gonna hand it off to you, Paris.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from sunny California. I'm Paris. I sit on the steering committee. And if there's at any point in time where my internet starts to get fuzzy, scream at me to turn off my video. Okay, Ray? So let me share my screen. What I wanted to do is tell y'all a little bit about, oh no, actually, hold on, something's wrong with my screen share. Don't move. Might not be sharing after all. Hold on one sec. Well, in the meantime, I can talk about it. So last year, we completed our first adventure, what we called Kubernetes annual reports. You heard from Ray and you heard from Bob and so many people probably over the last few weeks that we're really hunkering down on sustainability and trying to figure out plans and succession plans and all kinds of things, because now we've hit a new maturity stage in the project. It's definitely been a while for some folks that have been here for a bit. And the annual reports is a way for us to check in on all of our groups. I think we still have over 37 groups, which is a lot. And groups would be special interest groups, working groups, and user groups. There is discussion about, taking user groups to the CNCF level, but more on that probably at another community meeting in the future. But if you go to cncf.io, I'm going to share my screen and I'm just going to see what happens. Y'all yell at me if it looks weird. What do y'all see, Ray? Do you see the CNCF site?
We do.
Looks good.
Okay, cool. So this is what the report summary looked like last year. This report, the reporting is done by SIG chairs, speaking of the devils. And what we do is we pretty much collate all of the reports into this summary, which gives us a really nice high level approach to talk about our needs and talk about the things that we need to keep pace, the things that are currently going on, where we need help, etc. So this is what last year's looked like. We are almost done. And this is our current issue right now in the steering repo. Once we're done with getting all of the reports together within the next 2 weeks, we'll have published the next version of the summary. And we would love for all of you to help us get the word out for this. If you work at any employers that contribute upstream, or if you work at employers that are consuming any of this stuff and want to know about the health of the project, this is a great opportunity for that to happen. You can see here's SIG docs. I'm going to pull them up as an example. So if you're wanting to ever know about a SIG or a working group, you can come into the community repo right here. And then inside of the repo itself, there's a bunch of SIGs and working groups folders. And so let's go back into SIG docs. You'll see inside of here that there's annual report. So you can check out individual reports, not just the summary itself, because the summary doesn't necessarily have every single detail that's on these reports for each group, because we really highlight the themes and the growth areas and things like that as in the summary. The summary is already an 18-page document. So if we included every single detail in here, we would probably be, you know, printing out that one meme of you know, the stacks of paper next to Grace Hopper or something like that. So definitely trying to keep the summary as light as possible so that people can still read it. But yeah, you can see here with SIG docs as an example, they highlight their work, like what they're super proud of. They talk about the work that they're capturing outside of KEPs. And for folks that are just joining us, KEPs are Kubernetes enhancement proposals. And then also we go into project health. And this is where we're really starting to evolve as a project in trying to determine like what is project health, what isn't. So this is a really great way for us to kind of start to collect that information so that we can come up as a, you know, come up with a community as, you know, a better way of doing and measuring project health. Talks about like contributing documentation a lot. As everybody knows, that's kind of some of the first documentation that can go stale, especially like developer documentation. But we ask SIGs that in advance, and then this also helps new folks you know, get that information they need to get up and running in SIGs. And then of course, there's always the good question here of what these groups for end users and for consumers of Kubernetes that they're not currently getting right now. And the groups really put a lot of time and energy into these sections. So if we could get the word out and amplify some of this stuff, it would be amazing. Some of our SIGs even identified areas that have either single maintainers or only 2 maintainers. So we're going to try to elevate some of that stuff this year as well. We actually have several groups that are reporting in for that. Many of these areas of the project, though, are extremely hard to onboard and also very hard to get casual contributors on board when certain issues and things require, you know, 40+ hours plus, you know, complex knowledge of the code base. So sticking around and finding contributors that can hang out with us and climb the contributor ladder is really important for us. And that's a theme that we've seen this year. And you can even hear it from both of the past topics and things like that. So my first question out to y'all is, what can we do from this annual report perspective better? Are there topics that we can report on that you think would be not only interesting but valuable? Is there another way that we could present this information that you think would be valuable? And then I'll stop there and open for discussion.
I don't honestly think I heard any of that.
Yeah, there's some wind background. So the last question was, are there any topics to reports that is viable and interesting? So just, I guess, more of like a major themes of the various SIGs annual reports to kind of summarize and highlight for the complete annual report. I guess, is there a good way to send those suggestions? Is there like I see there's an issue here, a tracking issue from case steering.
I'll make one right now.
One other big thing for a lot of this is not just what's good for you, if your employers or other people that you know that might be interested in looking at this, things that they would find valuable that might encourage more contributions, that would also be super awesome feedback. Eddie?
Yeah, I think a good theme for us to surface, and we've talked about this a few times, but I don't want it to sound like a place of like doom and gloom and fear, but there's lots of cracks in a lot of like the important infrastructure of the project. And that should worry anybody who uses Kubernetes. So I feel like we need to call highlight to things that don't have enough owners in them, like 1 or 2 people are owners, or there's not enough bandwidth for reviews, and PRs are growing in the amount. So those are the things I would put front and center.
Good points. There's a chat from Danielle. There's also lots of things with more owners with very low owner bandwidth, which is exactly tracked well in reports, or Bob quotes active owners. So there's an issue linked on the agenda as well. So if you, is that a good place to add additional comments about this topic?
I'm making one right now, so
Okay.
give me like 30 seconds.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Curious if folks read last year's and consumed it and what they thought about it. One of the major feedback was that we buried the lead and had the help wanted at the bottom. And to Eddie's point, what we're going to do is put up the help wanted section into the pretty much like the right after the contributor snapshot. So that'll lead the report.
Do we need more of a lead there too? Like, do we need to spell it out as in like, here are the risks here. This is the potential damage that can be done. Like, make it very clear. Like, we want people to hire more full-time maintainers, right? Like that's our real dream and goal as a project right now, is we need more companies to hire more full-time maintainers, because it's really hard to be a part-time contributor to Kubernetes.
So Eddie, one of the problems is when we kind of like show that this is like a big problem, what ends up happening is first thing is, oh, it's a big problem. And the next one is like, no, it's not my problem. Somebody else will do it, right? So that's part of the reason why like breaking things into chunks and then shining the spotlight on that seems like a better thing to do at this point. So people will say, okay, that is a smaller piece of thing that we could possibly absorb, right? By pointing out the value of it, by saying. So I'm literally struggling here, trying to figure out like which way to voice the opinions going up into different organizations, because sometimes people will just walk away saying, hey, I'm not going to do anything about it, right? It's like I said before.
Yeah, but that's already what's happening, is people are worried that someone else is going to do it.
Exactly. So we have to overcome those barriers in how we are pitching this, right? So we are struggling clearly to articulate this message to different people in different ways, to get the points across and still show that we are trying to do our best from whatever resources we have, but it would definitely help if they pitch in too, right? So that's a way that seems to work a little bit better but again, suggestions are welcome.
Yeah, if you can, please talk to any sort of executive leadership or people that can make these sort of decisions and get their feedback on this stuff.
All right. Any additional comments or questions? All right. Thank you, everyone. The next topic is the triage bot closing important bugs. So this kind of stemmed from the reliability bar discussion. So I'm handing this off to Jordan Liggett and Wojciech. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Tzinski.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Yeah, so I think, yes, I was, it's a follow-up or, yes, spin up from like the larger discussion about like how to improve the our reliability in general. And from my discussion with Jordan like last week, we figured out like that we are like some of the issues are disappearing from our radar, even though those are like potentially serious bugs, but like we didn't yet, or they weren't yet prioritized. And the problem is that basically the bot is closing every single issue that is untouched for like I can't remember exactly 3 months or something like that. So the proposal is to actually stop closing issues that are marked as bug and high enough priority. I think we proposed their like priority important long-term or more. So important long-term, important soon, and critical urgent. I think there was a comment in the issue that we should probably consider extending that with like to only like triage accepted, which has a potential to drop something, but if we didn't triage it, then it's probably a problem on its own. So I think that's fine to add it. So so the question here is like, do you have any feedback on that, or like you have some reasons that you believe that it's a bad idea? Maybe one more stat that is useful. I think we have currently 80 such issues that were closed. So we if we decide to do that, we should probably reopen those. But yeah, the question is like about your feedback for doing that.
Any comments, questions? Up in chats, the main reason is triage can only be used by members, so random people won't be able to freeze them. Do we want random people to freeze issues? You want members to only triage or to accept triage? Daniel also put in chats, we need to at least replace it with some kind of ping bot. The bot has been a pretty useful way to get reminded about the existence of issues that were lost in the noise. And Bob replied, in my opinion, they should be vetted by community members. And +1 from Daniel, +1 from me as well. And Eddie in chats put ping bot would cause way more noise in his opinion, in Eddie's opinion. Josh put in chats, I thought the proposal was to still set them to stale. They just don't get deleted.
Yes, I hope that I told that, but maybe yes. The proposal is to still stale and even rotten them, just not close them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say part of this honestly should be adding triage or whatever, probably on a per SIG basis to go through these issues that are still open. Because we can have a bot ping them, but that's not honestly as useful as somebody doing a periodic sweep.
So sorry.
so one of the issues is that they don't get triaged and assigned to the right SIG. So there is a bunch of issues that get closed directly from there as well. There are SIGs that have regular triage calls and deal with, like AP Machinery, for example, does a really good job. I have a feeling that we should get more SIGs to adopt that best practice of having a triage this thing, and then figure out a way to reduce the bucket of things that don't get assigned to specific SIGs. I think those two things, if we can do, then it'll reduce, issues getting lost.
All of the SIGs that I'm involved in currently do triage, but I don't think that that prevents issues from getting lost. Like Node has an entire board of bugs. There is a column which are high priority bugs, which are all the bugs labeled important soon or critical urgent. We're still having them rot out because we just don't have enough resources to look at them. Like there's a backlog of over 150 valid bugs for Node. We don't have a team large enough to make much headway on that.
Yeah, I agree. We should definitely +1 to stop the bot from closing rotten issues, for sure. Plus, we need to do these additional 2 things that I mentioned.
I think that it's okay for the bot to close as rotten anything that's been triaged with needs information, because we have like a column of like issues where we ask the author like, hey, we can't do anything with this bug. It's not actionable. Can you add some information? Those get stale, and like I would be totally fine with those rotting out. The ones that I'm a little sad about are the ones that have been triage accepted and they get rotted out. Like maybe that's something that we say, okay, somebody's looked at this, it's valid, it was at least valid at this point in time, let's not auto close that.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I thought that like at least it's only going to be for triage accepted ones.
Could I ask a question? Is this the same bot that operates in, because we were having a similar conversation the other day with somebody else in the enhancements repo where the bot like goes through the stale, rotten, and then closes them. But like we have the problem where closing the issue is actually really bad because the actual KEP was never updated. So you're kind of just like disappearing something without a reason, you know, like in our repo, things should be closed by somebody with a reason, like we're not going to proceed with this, so we change the KEP to, you know, rejected or deferred or something. But by closing the issue, it just disappears, but there's never a decision that can be made on it. But then at the same time, it's bad because the decision wasn't made that needed to be made. So if this is the same bot, I think it is, Bob, like we can't really, for us, auto close, but there's also no such thing as like triage in that repo. So if this bot operates in multiple repos, then I think that's something to consider.
I think you could just turn it off for issues in the enhancements repo while leaving it on for PRs. Like I definitely, well, the bot is also only so helpful for PRs because I definitely see contributors submit a PR, the PR ends up needing a rebase, and like they take, you know, the rotten labels off and like reopen PRs that cannot be merged. And that is very frustrating to me as a maintainer because then I have to go back, close the PR and say, hey, this isn't mergeable. We can't do anything with this. So like, why are you reopening it? So yeah, I think issues and PRs probably should be treated differently.
Christoph?
Yeah, this is a really interesting discussion. I'm curious as well if anybody has any thoughts specifically around the timelines. Like that was another thread that was another thing that was mentioned on the issue at hand is like, do we still stale, rotten, and close things, but on a different timeline? Like right now, the current timeline from like any activity, if anybody commenting, anybody taking any activity on the issue, it takes 150 days with 3 reminders of nobody talking about or touching the issue at all for it to go to close. Is that the right timeline? Do we extend the timeline globally? Do we make the timeline different for triage accepted bugs, but still end up closing them? because there's still this idea that I can't get away from, where if nobody is working on a thing, if it is not important for anybody in some degree of time, even if 150 days isn't the right time frame, but like if nobody's touching about or talking about whether it's an issue in the enhancements repo, whether it's a triage accepted bug on Kubernetes, like if nobody's talking about it, is it actually useful to keep open?
Well, I think that it's like having something customizable would be good, because like for the enhancements repo, we also talked about this recently, where like the bot messages don't really coincide with the release cycle. And it's actually pretty normal to have some spaces between, like, let's say beta and GA, like you are going to wait for maybe 2 releases before you move it to GA. So there might not be any action on that issue, and that could be perfectly normal. So I think that some sort of either changing it across the board or some sort of like ability to have a bespoke time limit would help, because, you know, like for our repo, it just doesn't, the notifications are shorter than a release, and like usually people touch their enhancements in the beginning of the cycle. So I'm +1 on bespoke.
Ilana made a note in chat how they coincide with the 4 per year release cycle. Bob, then what's your?
So I would also +1 bespoke option, just so it can be customized to like better take care of the enhancements repo. I do think that if we mark something though in like KK as triage accepted, that means it's been validated that this is a legitimate like issue. I don't think we should be closing that. I know people in the past have gone like, essentially they'll just freeze it ahead of time. But if we want to sort of keep the stats of, you know, lifecycle stale, lifecycle, you know, rotten and all that, I do see value in that.
Yeah, I wanted to +1 to what Bob just said. I think if we really triaged a bug and marked it as like important, then I've seen a bunch of cases where it really took us like quarters, if not years, to fix something. But that, like, the fact that we didn't get to it as a community, I think it's still means that if like we can always, like, as SIGs can always close those bugs if they realize that those are no longer valid, but we shouldn't be forgetting about those, because if we really mark those as important, then important bugs, it's not about like anything else than bugs, then it really means that those are bugs that we should be fixing.
Madhav, then Dims.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So in general, I'm like +1 to everything being discussed, but I just wanted to mention one point just for the sake of putting it out there. Triage accepted right now, it can be applied by folks who are org members of the Kubernetes org. But at the same time, like each SIG has its own triage processes. And I remember like this one case where I was going through the list of issues trying to like apply the correct set of labels, and I applied the triage accepted for a particular SIG, and folks of that SIG were kind enough to educate me that, you know, we have this and this process of doing so. Now, if I made that mistake of doing so, and if we are saying that don't auto close labels that have triage accepted and this priority label, it's possible that triage accepted can be applied by folks who haven't actually validated that issue as being like, you know, like something that is something that shouldn't be auto closed. So this is something that I'm just putting it out there. I am +1 to like not auto closing such issues, but this is also like a valid. This is also an issue that might come up if we move ahead with this.
For what it's, I think like that sort of situation will be more of a edge case, or, you know, we should be talking to the like, we should try and educate our contributor base when we're doing sort of these things, of when it is applicable to use the triage accepted label. I still think like it is probably the best path forward to solve this current problem.
Dims and Josh, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, so well, this is a symptom of a larger problem, right? Like we are not getting people in, we are not like bringing them up to speed, and as a result, we don't have enough hands. Like, Elana is mentioning that, we know there are problems, but we can't go around fixing them. And so we let things go unless, there is a hair on fire kind of a situation, right? Another example similar to this is, hey, look at all the CI jobs for different SIGs, and you can see that, there are things that have been failing for like 1,000 days in a row, and we still don't do anything about it, right? We're just burning up CI money, and we're not turning down those jobs because nobody's looking at these things, because it doesn't cost anything for them either, right? But now we are seeing that there is a cost associated with all these things. So we have to go pay attention to cleaning up these jobs, because we are paying for storage costs for the logs. We are paying for the CPU memory that's used when the CI jobs are run, and the SIG K8s infra. We are trying to like visit all the jobs and say, hey, do you really need this? And can we shut it down, or can you switch this back on when you're ready and when you're willing to work on this, right? So there is a cost involved here now. So when there is some kind of motivation like that, we start paying attention, right? So I don't know, I probably went off on a tangent, but one of the points there is we need to do better as a community. We need to bring more people in. I know it's easier said than done. And yes, at least if we know and acknowledge all the problems we have, I think we'll have a better chance of dealing with it.
So, quick thing for to back up Dim's comment. Like right now, although most of our spend is going towards bandwidth, we don't have enough credits to cover the rest of the year. And those failing jobs definitely contribute to that.
Any additional comments? There's lots of good chat on Zoom. How tests, Danielle worked quite a bit to get tests back to green, and when it breaks, Josh made a reply like, why are they re-breaking? Feels like something we should talk about in terms of the chronic problem. And then there's Daniel reply, there's a mix of issues with why they're breaking. So, Alana?
This is a relatively complex conversation. Do we have time to have it on video?
We have 4 minutes left.
4 minutes at the top of the hour. Yeah. The jobs keep breaking. We spend a lot of time in the SIG trying to make them not break. We get them green, then they all immediately start breaking. Everyone's like, but you just fixed them. We don't have time to spend on that. They need constant upkeep. So yeah, it is a wide range of issues, as Danielle has mentioned, and like we have dozens of people working on them, and it's still a problem. So
I did put a TLDR in there. Like if you get a ping from one of us saying, hey, something is flaky or something is failing, please help us, because it takes a little bit of your time and it takes more of our time to go fix the same job. It'll be probably easier for you to do it than us. Thank you.
One more quick thing. Do we have enough resources to teach people how to hunt down these flakes and deal with these flakes? We have a couple old videos and things like that. And I know Jordan did a video at one point, but should we invest in some more material to try and like to give people to help do this sort of thing?
Yeah, we've talked about this a few times recently too. I know that the current CI signal leads are working on some content there. I talked to Jordan. Jordan is down for recording more stuff there. So yes, no one is against it. Everyone absolutely wants it. It's just we need to get bandwidth and prioritize it.
Okay. For what it's worth, at least for at least written documentation, we have some tech writers that are available to help. So it might just be trying to get something written up and engage with them.
Okay, all good points. So we have 2 minutes left in the community meeting. Are there any additional comments or questions? All right, well, thank you very much. There's some shout outs this month as well. I have 2 minutes. It's all on the shout out channel. Just if you want to highlight real quick, Kazan Fields for Marky Jackson, Pritish Samal, Grace Nguyen, and the 124 release enhancements team, Natalie Vlako, Antonia Ojia, Wojciech Tzinski, Piotr Tabor, and Pushkar Jogolkar. And the folks are running the Kubernetes Community Days in Bangalore. And big shout outs to all those folks. With that, any last comments or questions before we close the meeting? All right, thank you very much for your time and for joining us or for watching the recording. Hope to see you in Valencia.